Welcome back to another episode of BHAW Radio. I'm your host, Brian Rowan, and we have a special guest host on tonight. We have 2011 graduate Rudy Chelednik. He's on here tonight because he's the one who recommended our guest tonight, Mr. Tom Abraham. He's a 1965 graduate of the U.S. Military Academy. He wrestled and played football while at the academy. He was a two-time NCAA qualifier, EIWA finalist, Vietnam veteran, and welcome to the show, Mr. Abraham. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Brian and Rudy.
Yeah, it's good to have you guys. Starting out so the listeners know, Mr. Abraham insisted that we call him Tom, so we're gonna refer to him as Tom for the rest of the episode. No disrespect, but your wish is our command. So,
Okay.
Appreciate you coming on. I think starting it off. I mean, I'd like to know more about how you and Rudy know each other, and then why hear from Rudy also why you recommended Tom come on the show. I've seen some of your posts on Facebook on the Army Wrestling alumni page. I see you're actively involved. So that's how I first became aware of. Wow, we've got distinguished graduates. Looking at the wrestling page. So appreciate you coming on, and Rudy, I'll have you start kind of introduce that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So, Brian, first, thanks all for having me on here. My dogs might have an appearance just like when I really did. So that'll be fun as we go on today. But so Tom Abraham, my mom worked for him when he was building houses, and it was really my first introduction to West Point. And that was really all I knew. So when I was working my way through West Point, my first introduction, I read the Long Gray Line book. I believe it was about the class of 1966. And then Tom Abraham, and he's just a man of super high character. He kind of guided me through the process and really helped me get in. And he's continued to remain a really good friend, really good mentor, and just really fortunate to have him on here today and listen to his story. So, Mr. Abraham, I'm sure you have a different perspective than I do, but please go ahead.
Well, when I moved back home in the late '90s, home being Greensburg, Pennsylvania, I went to all the sporting events, and particularly wrestling, and I became interested. I stayed in touch with the wrestling program at West Point. I knew the coaches. I remember Coach Joe and the guy before him, Joe Heskett, and the guy before him, I forget his name. But I stayed in touch with them, and anytime I heard or saw a good wrestler from Western Pennsylvania, my area, I would write to the coach and say, hey, you ought to keep an eye on this guy. And I was trying to be pretty careful about not violating any recruiting rules or anything, and I didn't know what they were anyhow. So I just took newspaper clippings, and Rudy happened to be one guy that was outstanding at his high school, which was in my hometown, Hempfield High School. And I don't remember if I asked him if he would be interested in talking to anybody at West Point or not, but I know I sent some newspaper articles down and asked the coach to keep an eye on him. And actually, he told me he already had his eye on Rudy. So I don't know, maybe Rudy wasn't aware of it, but Rudy's reputation had already preceded him to West Point. And I just encouraged the coach to follow through with that, because Rudy was going to be a good wrestler, and I thought he'd fit into the Army program quite well.
Yeah, so on that, I went into my West Point experience pretty half-cocked, if we're going to be honest. Didn't know a whole lot about West Point. None of my family is in the Army. If you search the Army database, there are 2 Cheledniks in the whole Army database. So it was really interesting. But I remember my mom had just cleaned a house for Tom, and I got a recruiting letter from Coach Barbie. And me and my family talked about it, and we were like, okay, this could be an opportunity. And I asked my mom about Tom, and she's like, hey, he's a great guy. He went to West Point. Maybe this is an opportunity you want to look into. So Know it or not, Tom, you were very influential in me
Good.
choosing West Point. I'm very thankful for it. It's been the best decision that I've ever made for sure.
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
So yeah, I mean, enough about me. This is about you, Mr. Abraham. So Brian,
Glad you
let's
said
get
that,
back on
Rudy. I
you.
was going to say that next, but I kind of felt like a dick.
No way.
Well, I enjoyed keeping tabs on Rudy during his 4 years at West Point and after, but we went up as often as we could, and I didn't have any kids of my own, so Rudy was the one guy under my wing, and I was rooting for him the whole 4 years he was there. And I was a home builder. That's how I met his wife, and she did work for me. And
Yep.
she would clean the new houses that I built. So I was, and I'm like Rudy. There was nobody in my family ever even went to college, let alone served in the military. So I didn't know much about West Point or what it was entailed, but I never ever regretted going there.
So when you decided to go to West Point, was it more for football or wrestling or just the military in general? Or like what kind of drove your decision to go to West Point and when did that begin?
When I was in high school, I guess I just kind of took going to college for granted. But in reality, my dad worked in a factory. I don't know that he could have even afforded to send me to college. We never talked about it. But I did well enough in football that I knew I was going to get some offers, and I just assumed I would be going to college. And uh, when I was a junior, I was approached by the coaching staff at West Point. I was also approached by others. By the time I was a senior, I was approached by I had about 12 different offers to play football in a couple of schools that offered me a wrestling scholarship. And I thought the hometown folks should have the opportunity to see me continue my sports career. And Army played football on TV twice, so I decided to go to Army. And I wanted a school that had wrestling as well, because I played three sports in high school: football, wrestling, and baseball. And I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to be a one sport guy in college. I'd have gotten bored. So I sacrificed baseball and went for Division I football and wrestling. And the wrestling coach didn't even know me. I just kind of walked on after football season and made the team.
Was that after your plebe year?
No,
Like
we had plebe football. I mean plebe wrestling, plebe sports, and I made the wrestling team as a freshman. And then coach knew about me, but I went and I was paired against the top wrestler at Army, Al Rushatz, and I was his workout partner, and I was the only guy. We were the same weight, but he was strong and built like me, and I was strong and built like him, and I was the only guy that could give him a workout. Everybody else was no challenge to him, so I got some pretty good practice working with him, and and I had a pretty good plebe year. I don't know what my record was; I didn't keep track. But sophomore year, then he was gone. But then there was another guy that was pretty good. I forget his name at 191. So I got into a few matches. Coach wanted me to get down to 177, but I made it once or twice, and I don't even remember how many times I wrestled as a sophomore. But after that guy, I think his name was Nichols. I'm not sure. Nicola, John Nicola,
Ray Nicola.
Ray Nicola, yeah. He was pretty good too, and but once he was gone, there was just no stopping. I was the 191 pounder for 2 years straight, and I also wrestled heavyweight because we didn't have one my senior year.
How was it doing football and wrestling? Did you end up focusing on one or the other?
No, uh, I'd say in high school, wrestling was considered my my off sport. The main sport was football, but I enjoyed wrestling and I did well. I won sections, I won districts. I had a guy that beat me 6 times over 2 years, and I finally beat him in the final match. And I got to the WPIALs and lost in the finals by 1 point. Otherwise, I'd have been the first son of a father who made it to states or won that tournament and went to states. So I didn't make states in high school. But when I got to Army, I was interested in wrestling equally to football. But football was a big disappointment. I got recruited for football. That coaching staff left, and the freshman coaching staff never even gave me a chance to play in a game, which really ticked me off. But I got to wrestling, and I made up for it. I enjoyed the heck out of wrestling, and I was first team for the next 4 years, except for maybe a part of that sophomore year. And so sophomore year, I played a lot of football because I was on the B squad. But once I got to wrestling, wrestling was definitely my predominant sport. I did much better in wrestling than football. And junior year, there were 2 guys ahead of me at football, and they were both out during the preseason 2-a-days. And so I was running with the first team, and that was my big chance. And don't you know, we went both ways back then, and I was on defense on the corner, and one guy hit me low, one guy hit me high, and I tore one of my knees. So I missed half the year, my junior year. But I healed, and I played a little bit, and I wrestled. Didn't give me any problem at all wrestling. But transition from football to wrestling was football was over on a Saturday, and Sunday I was at wrestling practice. So there was never ever any time in between. And the same thing happened senior year. There was one guy ahead of me, and he was out with a cold or something. We haven't even played the first game, and I was running with the first team, and I tore the other knee, and I missed half of that year. So I never really went the distance on my football career. But again, football, after the Army-Navy game on Saturday, Monday I was at wrestling practice. And I did much better at wrestling both years than I did at football.
Everyone likes.
Sorry, Rudy.
Go ahead, Brian. No, go ahead.
Was there so you qualified for NCAAs in wrestling your junior year? Was there any pressure to just focus on wrestling after your junior year and not hang it up football, or was it understood that you're gonna do both your first year?
It was understood I was going to do both. And I think that might have been a mistake, but I never considered giving up football. And I'd never give up wrestling either. I would have done better if I had focused on wrestling. My bad knees never did hinder me in any way for wrestling. But I had 3 priorities when I went to West Point: football, wrestling, and academics. And as far as I could see, I excelled at 2 out of 3. And the academics didn't matter that much.
If you're gonna do a little highlight clip of this episode, I'll snip that part out.
I think most the teams kind of changed a little bit, but at least I know when me and Brian were there, that was pretty true. We tried to focus on wrestling and get through school the best that we could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, it was very difficult. I never had a day in the 4 years. I never had a day not in an NCAA sport. Football, wrestling, spring practice for football. And when you beat yourself up at practice, it's tough to come back and really apply yourself for academics. But I still graduated, and I still I came out, in my opinion, a lot smarter than a lot of others.
Sure. This is, they like to say the core has, but holy smokes, Mr. Abraham, like you had it harder than anyone. Geez, oh man.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I remember my senior year once wrestling was over, and we didn't have wrestling practice anymore. Oh my gosh, that last semester was just so much easier, and we didn't have a sport to do anymore.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Do you still stay in touch with the football team much? I mean, you're as invested in the wrestling team, it seems like, as just about anyone. Do you still follow both?
Yeah, I follow, but I don't. The guys I was closest to on the football team are mostly all gone.
Oh, okay.
We had Don Parcells and Bill Zadell, All American tackle, and John Seymour and Johnny Johnson, or Johnny. I don't know if Johnny Johnson's still going or not, but they were the backfield guys, and those are the ones that I palled with. Denny Lewis was a lineman. Uh, uh, it seems like the football guys have dropped pretty good. Um, and the wrestlers, we didn't have many senior wrestlers. Bob Arvin, of course, is gone, and he was gone from Vietnam. And Steenledge and Robbins and um, Ray Zakata or something like that. They were all class of '66. So I only had a couple of classmates that went all the way uh, uh, through senior year.
Yeah,
it's amazing now.
go
Looking
ahead,
back,
Brian.
we've talked about it on a couple previous episodes, but when I was going through, when Rudy was going through, you'd start out with about probably 15 plebes on the team, and then after the 4 years, you'd end up with about 5 or 6 or 7, because it's just tough. And when times get tough, if one thing's got to take a hit, sometimes it's wrestling. And one thing I think that's really amazing now is with the team they have, there's the last 2 or 3 years, there's been 12, 13, 14, 15 seniors on each of those teams. I think I attribute that to how close they are as friends. It's like, if all the guys were that close, it just adds another factor to make sure that people don't, you're not going to leave the team because those are your friends. Like, those are the people you want to hang out with. And
you guys had Coach Barbie, is that right?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I had Alex, and I learned something about myself and Alex when I went to his funeral, and that was a long time after West Point. And to tell you what kind of coach he is, I was good. I was not great. I didn't win a national championship. I should have won Easterns, but I lost in the finals to the quarterback from Syracuse. But I realized at his funeral that even though I was always confident, very confident in my ability as a wrestler, uh, he was more confident in me than I was. And I didn't think that was possible. And he believed in me. And that's what a coach has to do. Coach has to believe in you. And I think your coach, Ed Barbie, and the one we have now, what's his name?
Kevin Ward.
Kevin Ward. And I think those guys, they also believe in their wrestlers. And if the wrestlers would understand that, I think they'd believe just that little extra half inch more in themselves. And I think they'd come out better.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're doing a great job. I think Kevin's, he came on the show last week and kind of talked to us about the team in preseason. how the guys are doing, and said they're looking good, they're working hard. I don't know if you saw the post today. They actually had wrestling. They had like simulated matches. I think like wrestle offs on the apron. So
Really?
right in front of the mess hall, they set up the
Wow.
mats. Yeah,
Wow. That's
so
great.
pretty cool little ambiance. Rudy, did you see that?
I did. Yeah. Coach Ward's definitely doing a great job.
Yeah.
He's extremely invested in the program, and he's putting some neat wrinkles in it for sure. But yeah, that looked neat. I was like, man, I kind of wish I was there. I want to get out there, but I'm old and broken now, and I can't wrestle anymore.
You're down to weight though, Rudy. Were you like
I mean,
145 pounds?
I could. I think if push came to shove and I really cut hard, I could make 141. Like I would like to, but other than that, no, I can't wrestle anymore. Those days are long gone.
So,
But
Mr. Abraham, so kind of leading into, I want to get into your time in Vietnam and posting the academy. So I feel like that's so interesting, but I don't want to lose sight of also kind of your time at the academy and like how things were so much, were different than, as everybody says, the core has. You've been back to West Point several times. What are some of the big things that you think, not necessarily for good or bad, but like changes or things that you've seen that are very different, or things that like, wow, this stayed exactly the same?
Well, there's no bracing anymore, and I don't think that's a bad thing uh, that they got rid of bracing because that didn't make a lot of sense. Uh, but I understand there's uh, forgiveness. People get a second chance if they lie, cheat, or steal, depending on how serious it is. They get a second chance. In my day, if you told a lie about shining your shoes, you get kicked out of the academy. And, that seems pretty puny and picky, but that was the honor code that we lived by. And I respected that. And I don't know that I've ever told a tiny little fib or a white lie or whatever you call it. And I don't think anybody should be getting a second chance if they do. Uh, who's to say what what's the measure of a little white lie? You can't have lie at all on the battlefield for sure, and that's different. Um, I understand there's a lot more lenient leave policy. That might be good. That makes you more like feel like you're at college. Um, um, and last time I was up there, I think it was maybe for a funeral, not last week, but before that, uh, an officer came over and he introduced himself um, as the what's it called? Some kind of special officer they didn't have before, diversity officer. Uh, they've got some things that are along the lines of diversity and liberalism that I don't particularly agree with, but I'm just going to let it go at that. Um, but I think I think West Point still produces some high quality graduates. There's a lot more women now. Of course, we had no women when I was there. And I think there's a good place for women at West Point and also in the Army. I am totally against women in combat uh, arms. And I don't know if they're being sent. I think they are being sent to combat arms now. But I'm not too much in favor of that. And I can't think of anything else. I don't know. I still have no regrets about Gone. I think in many ways they've become more liberal and more soft. But um, I'm an old guy, so I don't know if I can judge that properly.
I'd say Rudy saw. So I think, and he's still running in the Army. So
Yeah.
I think we can agree on that. No, I'm just teasing. No, I appreciate that insight. That was kind of a curveball I threw at you too, because that's not really about your, your past, your bio. So I was, threw that one out there a little bit, but I always find it so interesting, hearing from, graduates from, the 60s or 70s or 80s and kind of before the new generation of West Point kind of came to be, and kind of, because some things remain exactly the same. And some things never change. And then other things go, drastically different and just evolve over time. So I find it interesting. I kind of want to know that. So I appreciate you sharing. So kind of, was when you're getting ready for commissioning and branching and posting, was it the same process back then as it is, where in November of your first year, you pick your branch, and then kind of, late winter time, you pick your post and then graduate and you go there and you go through basic officer courses? Or how did you guys select at the time when you're going through the academy?
My class did not have basic uh, um, branch courses that we went to. I think there were maybe two classes that did not go to branch training, and then the Army realized that was a mistake, and then they went back to it. I think we could have used it. I felt that when I graduated, I got sent to Fort Hood, Texas, and I was. I mean, as far as choosing a branch, that I imagine was the same. I didn't know what branch I wanted to be. I just knew that if there was a war, I wanted to be a warrior and not a staff guy. I don't want to deliver the mail or bring the food. I want to shoot the rifle. And I didn't want to come home after the war and feel guilty that somebody else fought the war and I didn't. So I chose infantry, and I got it. Anybody who chooses infantry almost gets it. But I don't know that. But I never did much in the way of cadet activity because of the sports that I was in. I don't recall ever having an officer type responsibility in the company. Uh, I didn't do a lot of parades, and I don't regret that at all. I didn't like that stuff. Um, but uh, I did okay with my training. I did okay in airborne school, and I did okay in ranger school. So I didn't feel like I missed out on any particular training. But when I got sent to Fort Hood, there was no infantry around, so there was no furtherance of my training, and there wasn't a whole lot to do. And I found out, well, I went to the airborne school and came back, went to ranger school and came back. And then I'm still sitting around sucking my thumb a lot, no troops to command, and not much to do. So I found out that there was a wrestling tournament at 4th Army at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I went down there and won at 213. And they sent me up to West Point, and I wrestled in the All Army Wrestling Tournament, and I won that. So I guess you could say there was a time when nobody in the Army could beat me.
That still might be true.
It might. Well, I haven't lost since, but
There you go.
but then I went to the inner service, and I lost not to Navy but to the Air Force guy, and in the finals. So I came in second. But then they sent me to Baghdad, Iraq, to coach the Iraqi Army wrestling team. It was part of a State Department program that they had, where they sent military officers to Iraq to coach Iraqi Army athletic teams. The problem is, I did not speak Arabic. They did not speak English, and it was one heck of an assignment. Uh, they would pick me up in a Jeep every morning about 7 o'clock. Practice was from 7 to 9, and I had to use arm motions and go yalla, 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 run. It was pretty tough to coach when you don't have the language. Um, and then I'd come back to the American Embassy about 9, 10 o'clock, and I'd have the rest of the day at the pool, and then a party with the service people at night. And then Vietnam was starting. That was in 1966, the spring of 1966. So I wrote back to Colonel Billy Joe Chance, who was the infantry advisor, and I said, "Hey, Colonel, it looks like there's a war starting up, and we're probably all going to go. So when it's my turn, I don't want to go with a ragtag outfit like I'm assigned to at Fort Hood. I want to go with an outfit where I have a chance to survive. I'd like to go to the 173rd Airborne, if you can pull it. And I'm not in any hurry, but when I go, can you see that I go to the 173rd? 2 weeks later, I had orders for the 173rd Airborne. So I guess I volunteered, and that's the only time the Army gave me the assignment that I wanted, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. It was a great outfit. The airborne troops were great, and we spent most of the year out on patrol and in the jungles. We lost a lot of guys, and I enjoyed being a rifle platoon leader. And every time we went out on a mission, I got everybody together in a huddle, just like we do for before a wrestling match. And we said the Lord's Prayer together, and we all came back. I never lost a guy while I was a platoon leader. Unfortunately, as soon as I moved to a higher position and somebody else took over my platoon, that lieutenant walked into an ambush, got killed along with half of my 30 men, and then the colonel wanted to put another lieutenant in his place, and he came to me and said, "Hey Tom, I've been around just almost as long as you. I'm second in seniority. I want to get off the front line like you did, and I don't feel good about going back into another rifle platoon," because he had mortar platoon at the time. I said, "I'll talk to the colonel." So I went and talked to the colonel, and I said, "Colonel, I'll take over my old platoon." And he said, "No, I want you where you are." I had the mortar platoon for the battalion, and he said, "I want Al to take over that." Yeah, well, 30 days after the other guy got killed, Al walked into an ambush and got killed along with the other half of my platoon. So war is no fun. I just missed it by a little bit, and I figure I've been lucky ever on those two occasions. And but I still wouldn't trade the experience of leading men in combat for anything. I never lost a man, but we prayed together, and we were cautious. And I tell anybody, including cadets, when I come up to present the Arvin Award, I tell them, when you're a soldier and you're in combat, you never relax. You sleep with one eye open. You're always prepared, and you always expect the unexpected. And that's how I survived, and that's how anybody should approach being in combat. So that was it. Then I came back and became a company commander at a training company, and decided to get out after my time was up.
Tom, truly from the bottom of my heart, and I tell my soldiers all the time that, we're so lucky right now that I have the privilege of serving in an army that the American people generally, respect us and everything we do. And it's really that you guys, your generation, had to go through that tough time of coming back. So really, truly, thank you for everything that you've done. I mean, I tell my guys all the time, hey, you don't understand how lucky you have it, and how easily that can be lost. So yeah, seriously, thank you for your service, and I love hearing these stories.
Thank you.
It's just a real honor to hear of you today.
It was definitely a shocker when we came home, the way we were greeted. I landed in San Francisco. There was an airline strike. They were just getting over it. And a lot of people were getting bounced from one plane to another, one flight to another. And they wouldn't give us a flight all the way home. And the people were not very friendly at all when we got home. And I happened to luck out in Chicago. I got to Chicago, but then I ran into a businessman who respected my uniform, and he took me to the the VIP place and bought me a sandwich, and he sat on the plane with me and even gave me a ride to my fiance's house near Pittsburgh when we got home, and uh, he was his name was his name was Marsh, and he was from Wheeling, and he was in the tobacco business. So you might have heard of Marsh Wheeling cigars. Uh, I started smoking Marsh Wheeling cigars after that for a long time. But he was a great guy. But the mood or the love that the country has had for veterans and soldiers uh, since that time has never yielded. It was really bad when we were there, and that's okay. Well, that caused a lot of PTSD and depression too. It never affected me, but once it improved. It improved when we went into Iraq, I think, and the country turned around, and it hasn't faltered yet. So I hope that I hope that patriotism continues and sticks with us.
Sir, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You mentioned a few minutes ago about when you were presenting the Bob Arvin Award back at West Point.
Yeah.
I understand you were pretty close with him, at the academy, and pretty close friends. Talk about him a little bit. There's not many people who know him directly. I think that's something that I think goes. Everybody knows the reputation of him, being named after the gym, but not many people know him. If you could talk, a little bit about Mr. Arvin and kind of your relationship with him a little bit.
If I could have designed a guy to be my brother, I would have designed Bob Arvin. Uh, he and I came from the same background. Um, we both had good parents. Mine worked in a factory. I don't think his did, but Bob, I mean, neither one of us cussed. I think the first swear word I said in my whole life was hell, and that was midway through plebe year when somebody forced me to say so many days until Army beat the hell out of Navy. Well, Bob Arvin was the same kind of guy. Didn't walk around swearing. Uh, he ate his eggs with a fork. I I scooped mine up with a toast. So he had a lot of class, and uh, and we were tight like brothers. And uh, Bob was a super good guy. He was my wrestling partner once Rushatz and Nicola graduated. He was 177, I was 191. And he was top of the class, and I was elsewhere. And but we were like brothers, very good friends. And actually, on the day that I was leaving Vietnam, August 15th of 1967, uh, a Jeep approached me. I was in the base camp. The rest of the battalion was out in the jungles. And here comes a Jeep, and somebody yells out, "Hey, Tom." And there's Arvin. I don't know how he knew where I was, but he found me. He was an advisor to the Vietnamese airborne unit, And he said, "We don't have ammo." Can you imagine that? The top cadet, the first captain of my class, gets sent to combat 1 year after graduation, and he doesn't have enough ammo to fight the war. So I took him down to the ammo shed. It was locked. I broke the lock and filled up his Jeep with as much stuff as he could carry. And I couldn't get him to take any more. And um, 2 weeks later, he got wounded. And um, being the leader that he is, he went right back into the fray. And this time he got wounded, and I think a bullet hit his uh, collarbone and ricocheted into his brain or someplace, and it killed him. Uh, and I just tell you one more thing about Bob Arvin, and he was a good wrestler. He was very good in high school, better than I was. I think he was a state champ in Michigan, and just a super, super, super nice guy, and a gentleman in every way. And um, he his classmates and teammates from Ypsilanti, Michigan, where he grew up, for 50 years they gave an award in his name, or scholarship in his name, to kids from the high school. Um, there were places around his hometown that were named after him. We've got the Arvin Gym by my class named after him. We present the Arvin Award to the senior wrestler who best exemplifies the example that Bob set in academics and love for wrestling and in leadership. And um, when I was in combat, I was tough as nails. I remember I remember a movie before I went. It was starring Broderick Crawford, and he was a sergeant, and all his men were crying over guys who got killed. And he told his men, he said, that's not your buddy anymore. That's just a hunk of meat. You know, get over it. Get on with the battle. Well, that's how I approached Vietnam. And there were lots of bodies that I loaded on airplanes, guys that used to be my men, and two guys that took my place even. And I think the first time I ever shed a tear after that was at a reunion of the 173rd, maybe 10 years after Vietnam. And the sergeant major and I were at the bar, and Sergeant Major said, we both had a drink, whiskey, and he said, Captain, to the Army. So we toasted to the Army, and then we toasted to the ladies, and then we toasted, and then I just blurted out, to Bob Arvin. And that's the first time I ever cried. He was a good guy. That's all I could say. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Appreciate you sharing that. The listeners, they're listening. I'm sure that they can, if there's graduates there, a lot of my classmates, went to war and didn't go through what you went through, but can relate in a sense. And you look back at some of the memories, and it's not the best times, a lot of them, but I really appreciate you sharing. You can get really emotional.
I don't think I meant to. It just came out.
No, Tom, I just appreciate hearing these stories. I mean, hardly anyone has the experience with Bob Arvin that you did. So really, thank you for opening up to our listeners. And I would say any of our cadets now, or folks that are thinking about going to West Point, because I didn't understand that coming into it, and what that kind of connection to service means. And I mean, you're a wonderful representation of that. I think all of us that have served understand that, and we understand exactly where you're coming from. So
Yeah.
really, again, everything you've done today, thank you. But I just appreciate you opening up on your story, because I'm sure it's hard, as it is for a lot of us, to talk about war. But it's just been an awesome conversation today for me personally. So thank you.
Definitely, people who have not been don't understand, no matter how you tell it to them. There's no way they can understand. But we understand, and we understand each other, and we just have to deal with it.
Sure.
By the way, I forgot one thing about my military service, which makes me unique. My battalion, the 2nd Battalion of the 173rd, 2nd of the 503rd of the 173rd Airborne, we are the only unit, American unit, in Vietnam and since, that made a combat parachute jump. And we did it in Vietnam. So when I go to a wounded warrior camp and we're talking to guys with PTSD, we those of us who are participating, we introduce ourselves, and I tell them, and therefore that makes me by definition a badass. I am an official badass because I made a combat jump.
Oh my gosh, I'm just a dirty leg. I've never been to airborne school. I don't know what's wrong with
You
me,
didn't know.
but
Oh,
I
gross.
yeah, I know, right? But oh my gosh, more power to you. I just can't imagine jumping into combat. That's pretty awesome.
I thought when I jumped out on the first training jump that, geez, how am I going to do this? And there's all these kids who are 18 years old, private nothings, and they're going out the door, and I'm gonna how can I be their leader if I'm worried about it? I was worried about it, but I went out the door, and I did it 5 times. And then when it comes to you think that's a pucker factor. When you're jumping into a combat zone, that's a pucker factor like none other. But we came out of it okay.
Was your jump successful? No issues? Didn't get
Well,
dropped in the trees or anything like that?
no, no. But the last movie I saw before I went to Vietnam was The Longest Day, and all I could think about were those guys who got stuck in the trees and shot at by the Germans, stuck in church steeples and all that stuff. And I took my rifle. I had my 45, my smuggled in 38 revolver. I had a big Jim Bowie knife. I had a K-bar hunting knife, a Marine K-bar knife, and I had several pocket knives in different pockets. I wasn't getting hung up in any tree. And I wasn't going to get shot out without shooting back. But it was a we were supposed to be rescuing a POW camp, and there was none there. But it was 2 weeks later in that area where the first combat happened, where the guy that took my place got killed, walked into an ambush. So there were people in that area, but we must have surprised them. They didn't know we were coming.
Wow, that's awesome.
So, when you talked about earlier transitioning from the military, but you took an assignment at Fort Polk after Vietnam. Talk to us a little bit about kind of your last duty in the military, and then what it was like transitioning out, and how you picked your profession outside of the military.
Well, Fort Polk was where I was assigned when I came back from Vietnam, and I went down to Washington to get that changed, and they wouldn't change it. The Army never gave me an assignment that I wanted except the 173rd. So I was down there, and then I got orders for Vietnamese language school. Or no, but, while I was at Fort Polk, again, I was a training company commander, uh, uh, AOT for advanced infantry training. And I decided that, well, if I'm going to stay in the service, and I didn't know if I wanted to or not, if I'm going to stay in, this war isn't going to last forever, and I didn't want to do staff stuff. So I wanted to get into foreign embassies, and there was a program called the FAST program, Foreign Area Specialist Training, and you had to be military intelligence for that. So I put in for a branch transfer, and I went to intelligence training in Baltimore, and I called it spy school. So I was learning to be a James Bond kind of guy. That was fun. And then they sent me to Texas and to go to the Vietnamese language school. And I was within a couple of weeks of going back to Vietnam for my second tour, but I was already at 4.5 years, and my class had been extended 18 months. But because Nixon started bringing the troops back, uh, they ended the extensions and didn't send me over to Vietnam. So I said, well, why don't you just let me get out and I'll start my civilian career? And they did. And I sent out resumes all over the place to headhunter agencies. And classmate of mine had a father who was a big shot at U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh. And I wanted to pursue that, but he never got back to me. And my mother had a cousin up in Boston who was a group controller for Polaroid Corporation. So I contacted him, and the day I got out, he flew me up to Boston for interviews, and I took a job with Polaroid, and I was there for 2 years as a financial analyst. And um, um, that guy left after I was there for about 2 years, and I didn't like it really that much. I didn't like living in Boston that much, so I wanted to get closer to Pittsburgh. But the woman that I married when I got back from Vietnam who was from Pittsburgh, didn't want to go home to Pittsburgh, so we agreed on Washington D.C. as a compromise. So I contacted some headhunter agencies in D.C., and everybody said, hey, thanks for your resume. It looks good. We'll let you know when we have something. Well, after weeks and weeks of waiting for somebody to have something, I said, to hell with it. I wrote two of them a letter and said, there's my resume. I'm coming down, whether you see me or not, and I'm going to find some headhunter that's going to agree to meet me so they know who I am so I can find a job in Washington, D.C. So I found one company talked to me, and they sent me out on 5 or 6 interviews, and I got offers from every one of them, and I ended up in construction, and that's how my life in construction started.
Appreciate that. And so I understand you're pretty involved in some veteran groups and giving back. Talk to us a little bit about. I mean, I listened to your there was a podcast or an interview you did with AOG, and they talked a little bit about it, but you didn't really get in depth. How did you get into that? And talk to us a little bit about what you're involved with and how you started giving back.
There was my wife passed away. My second wife passed away in 2016, and um, I was already in my 70s, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do or what I wanted to be, or I'm not even sure I cared if I lived very much longer or what. But I wanted to do something with the rest of my life, and I met a friend in Florida at the airport. I was waiting to come home, waiting for a plane, and I talked to this person for a couple hours, and when this lady went to my church. When we got home, uh, she called me the next day and said, "Hey, do you think that's by accident we met?" I said, "I don't know. What are you thinking?" I knew she was married. I didn't want to fool around. Uh, she said, "Why don't you do something with the veterans?" Because she knew I told her I wanted to do something with the rest of my life, but I didn't know what. She said, why don't you do something with veterans? I said, well, I already do. I help out at Wounded Warrior Camp 4 or 5 times a year for 1 day. I give mock interviews, and we help the guys go find a job. And they're at this program for a week. And the last day, we give mock interviews to help them get used to interviewing. And she said, well, maybe you can do more than that. And I said, well, maybe you're right. So I thought about it. And then I came up with this idea that maybe I can help more veterans, guys with PTSD. And my feeling was from going to 40 or 50 of these week-long Wounded Warrior things where I'm doing mock interviews, talking to a lot of Wounded Warriors, I said to myself, what these guys really need, they'll get whatever medication they need, they'll get whatever medical help they need, but what they don't get is to talk to somebody who has the same experience and to find out how they dealt with it. My theory was that the guys with PTSD just need somebody who understands. We talked about understanding. Somebody who understands combat and knows what they're going through and can give them some advice. Somebody who's already been through what they've been through. And I put together a team of guys who have all had PTSD. I have one guy that great big guy who was like a gentle giant. He put a gun to his mouth, pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. And he decided to turn to God. And he did, got himself straightened up, and now he's one of the guys that speaks at my retreats and tries to tell other guys how to deal with PTSD and depression. And we just got started 2 years ago. We had one retreat. We had intentionally, we wanted to keep it to between 6 and 12 guys so we could give them some attention. Had them come in for 3 or 4 days. We talked, I had different speakers. And one of the speakers is one of my board members who's a female who was not combat, but she lost a son. And she too went through, why do I want to live anymore? That kind of stuff. So they make good speakers. And so I had them in for 3 days, and it was well received. And the guys got something out of it. We don't charge any money. We don't pay any money to anybody. We will pay for speakers, and we'll pay for transportation costs if we can afford it. And then we had, and then I decided, it's a really slow process the way we're going about it. We got to have a way to find these veterans who have PTSD. So I decided to have a banquet. And I said, we're going to have a banquet, and we're going to invite veterans. We're going to have them come free, because otherwise they probably wouldn't pay to come. And we're going to get a guest speaker, and that guest speaker was a guy from Navy who wrestled Bob Arvin, and he wrestled me in high school. His name was Dave Carey. He wrestled for Jeanette. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, Rudy, but Dave Carey was a POW, spent 7 years in captivity, and he was a friend of mine. We wrestled in high school, and he was older than me, so he did beat me, and I never had a chance for a rematch. But when he wrestled Bob Arvin beat him, and he said he whooped him real good. So So that was interesting. They wrestled for Navy. But anyhow, he lived in Texas. He did motivational speaking. He didn't charge me a dime. He came out. I insisted on paying for his plane fare. And I put him up in the hotel. And he was great. We had 320 people show up. 120 of them were veterans. And the rest were people who just covered the cost of the meal. And we were at the Sheraton in Greensburg, and it was a great event. We got names and addresses of veterans, not all who need help with PTSD, but we got some. A lot of them were old farts from other wars, but still a lot of Vietnam era guys. And that's what we're going. That's our MO right now. To have small retreats where we can deal with guys one on one, and once a year have a big banquet with a guest speaker. Maybe I'd love to get Alejandro Villanueva, the West Pointer football player, who also fought in Afghanistan. You know, guys like that come and be the speaker, and I'll always get the veterans to come free at $20 a person. 100 guys, it's nothing. We can do that. So we raise money. We get donations. It's not hard to get donations. We got about $20,000 in the bank right now, and we're just waiting for COVID to relax a little bit so we can get another years of programs going. And that's what we do to try to help veterans. They need our help, and much to my delight, there are lots of organizations who do the same thing. They're bigger than us. Somehow they are able to raise millions of dollars, but we go for the smaller scale. We do what we can. So that's it.
That's pretty remarkable what you're, what you did in such a short amount of time too. It makes it kind of, people want to get involved. I think taking the next step, kind of when that lady approached you and said, hey, you do this, but you could be doing more. Makes you think of what you're doing, makes me think, and other, maybe others think, what else could I be doing to maybe help out a little bit more? Because I know it hits home with a lot of people. I know there's been a lot of outreach, especially for PTSD and suicide here in the last few years. I always see the 22 kind of different challenges for suicide, veteran suicides a day, and different awareness strategies.
They just need somebody to talk to, somebody who understands. And the doctors who have never been to combat, they don't understand. Wives don't understand. We try to focus on a belief in God, regardless of religion. We don't care what religion. We try to suggest everybody has a fire team. That's kind of a Marine term that they use at these Wounded Warrior things. 5 or 6 people that you can turn to if you're having problems. We want them to be better husbands, better fathers, and mostly to believe in themselves. And they're weak in all those areas, and that's what we try to do.
Tom, thank you for what you do. One of the real pleasant surprises, I guess, if you will, from my experiences of West Point is the people that you meet, and it's people like you, really. I truly, you might look 25 still, but you're not anymore, and you're still, putting your head down and doing good things for the soldiers. I don't know how you find the energy to do what you do, but it's pretty incredible, and I think that's really what I've taken away with 10 years of reflection now of West Point is just the incredible people that you go to school with, and the incredible people that West Point kind of produces, and just thanks for everything through the years, and what you continue to do, because it's absolutely necessary, and you're continuing to change lives every day. So thank you.
Well, I decided after that conversation I had with that friend in Florida, I decided that what I'm going to do with the rest of my life is what God wants me to do. And it's whatever I feel that God wants me to do is what I'm going to do. And I figure I'm going to live as long as I'm doing that until he doesn't need me anymore. He's got somebody else lined up. So I want to help the veterans. I've also taken on helping some of the widows of classmates of mine that were friends of mine, and widows that I feel like maybe they need some help. They won't admit that they do, but if you give them some help financially, then you can tell that they need the help. So I try to do that. I've tried to help a couple people from church who are maybe also needing help. I'm not a rich guy. I never have been, but this past year I got my claims for all my VA benefits that I suffered because of Vietnam, like Agent Orange, heart disease, knees and hips that were actually football injuries. But I finally got a big settlement from the VA, and it would have been nice 10 years ago, but it comes now. So I'm doing what God tells me to do with it. So that's what I'm doing.
That's absolutely awesome.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think it's good place to end with the show. And I appreciate you coming on, sharing all your insight. I know it got pretty emotional at different points, but I appreciate you sharing. I know the listeners, they love hearing from all different generations and perspectives. So it was great to have you on. And I don't know if you have any last words to add, Rudy or Mr. Abraham before we end it.
I just want to thank you both for giving me the opportunity, and I never mind talking about what we can do for others. It's not about what I've done or that might be interesting, but the important thing is what we all can do to help others, and that's my mission now.
Well, thank you, Tom. Truly.
Okay.
Really appreciate it.
So, yeah, I appreciate you having me on the show.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Tom. Have a good night.
Say hi to your mom and dad.
I will.
And dad.
Absolutely.
All right. See you.
Thanks for tuning in to the BHAW radio show. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. If there's something you'd like to hear on a future show, reach out to us on any of our social media, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Or you can reach us at email, bhaw.radio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and as always, go Army, be Navy.